Hi, my name is Kathy Absar, and in the spring of 2005, my son was diagnosed with schizophrenia. He was 20 years old. He had been out of school for about 6 months, and his behavior had gotten more and more bizarre. It had gone downhill. We couldn't convince him to go to the doctor. Finally, I tricked him into going to the mental health officer in Blount County. Her name is Kathy Irvin, and she was absolutely wonderful. But we had to do a forced commitment. This means that we, convinced the judge that he needed to be hospitalized. And then I saw my 20-year-old son taken off in the back of a sheriff's car in handcuffs, okay? He had done nothing wrong other than get sick. It was very difficult. And so today I'm going to talk about that experience, and I'm going to talk about it in the stages of grief. So, I got the initial diagnosis, and told something so horrendous that I couldn't believe it. The doctor was probably wrong. He couldn't have this illness. The second stage that we go through is anger. So we get angry at the doctor for giving us this diagnosis. We get angry at the person for getting ill. We get angry at ourselves for not being able to fix it. Okay. Basically, you name it, I was angry at everything. So the next stage is bargaining. We try to make a deal with somebody, with God, with the universe. We want to fix it. And then after that, depression. We get very sad. And then finally, we move into acceptance. And when we move into acceptance, that's when we can actually make some type of forward progress. And what people don't realize with mental illness is that you're going through this grief process, and family members don't recognize it. They don't get the help they need. And they can't move through that grief process. They still have a loved one, and he's, appears to be fine, but the one that they have known for 20 years is no longer there. All their hopes and dreams is gone. This person's, probably not going to get to go to college. He's not going to have the successful life that his parents, that I wanted him to have. So it's very sad. Initially, I thought to myself when he was first diagnosed that please don't let it be drugs, okay? And then when we got the diagnosis of schizophrenia, oh my God, please let it be drugs. That was something I was familiar with. I had never known anybody with schizophrenia. I didn't have any concept of what it was, okay? So he was in the hospital 3 weeks at UAB. We were asked a lot of questions, but not a lot of people actually talked to us about what was going to occur or what the diagnosis meant or what we could expect, okay? He was put on an antipsychotic and sent home, and he was still not the young man that I had known for 20 years, okay? It would have helped if someone had explained to us that the drugs weren't going to fix it, okay? If they had told us to be a little patient with him, okay? If somebody had looked at us and said, this is not your fault, this is not his fault, it just happens, okay? He had not done anything wrong, but I didn't know that at that time. So we tended to push him to, go back to school, get a job. We just didn't know, that he was going to need time. And eventually, he was in denial, we were in denial, and he stopped taking his meds, okay? And he was arrested this time in Huntsville and given a choice to go to jail or to go to back to the hospital, okay? And this time he was in Hillcrest for 3 weeks, And while he did pretty good there, we still didn't get any counseling as far as family. I still didn't know what to expect from his illness. I still thought the medication was going to make him better, okay, and make him well. And it didn't bring my son back, okay. I was still very much in denial, but it alternated between anger and depression. I still had not gotten any acceptance, and this illness had been going on for over a year and a half now, okay. I stumbled into a NAMI meeting, found a flyer, and started going to those. Eventually took a family-to-family class, and there I received a lot of education about what the illness means, and it gave me more empathy for my son's illness, okay? And that was the first time that I had understood what he was going through, and how long this process was going to be. It wasn't something that we were going to get over with in, 6 weeks or 6 months. This was an ongoing thing that we needed to learn how to deal with, okay? So I had begun to accept his illness, okay, and accept that, even if the medications weren't fixing the illness, they were helping, and that the alternative was much worse, okay? So this was 2 years into the illness, and he refused to take his meds, so I no longer allowed him to live at my house. He lived with his dad. His dad was still pretty much in denial about the illness, and a year and a half later, he had lost down to 115 pounds. He was hypomanic, and he's 6 foot, so he had gotten extremely thin. His thought disorder was extremely bad, and he thought that if he didn't eat, then the starving children in Africa would have more food. That it's really bizarre thought patterns. And I had seen him one Friday. I had met him in Homewood, and he was at a skateboard park, and I had looked for him for 15 minutes, and I couldn't find him on the ground in this area. And when I finally found him, he looked like a concentration camp survivor. He was so thin, and that was the third crisis that he had. And we went out to eat, and we talked, and I was really afraid that would be the last time that I saw my son, and I didn't know what to do, okay? I had, had him hospitalized, 2 times, and I was lost, okay? The next week, he was stopped at a stop sign in Aniana, and he was picked up by the police department there. He was arrested. He was charged with DUI, possession of a concealed weapon, resisting arrest, and he had marijuana possession, okay? And he was in jail. So I called Kathy again and wanted to get her help to get him in the hospital, okay? But his father's like, no, we don't want your help. We can handle it, okay? And he was in jail for 3 days, and then someone in the jail said, he really doesn't need to be here. He needs to be in the hospital, okay? And this time we got him in Caraway. And the state of, beds and Alabama is really horrible. So, but we were fortunate each time to find a place and get him in the hospital fairly quickly. Okay, But my husband's a physician, so it's easier for us. I can't imagine what it's like for other people. It's got to be extremely difficult to wait and see their loved ones sick and not be able to get them in the hospital. So he's at Careaway, and he is getting better. They have started giving him Prolixin, okay? And but it's coming up 3 weeks, and we know that he's not going to be able to come home because he's not really stable, and we decided to send him to Bryce, okay? So he has been transferred to Bryce, and I think he's there, but I haven't, because, you know, he was over 19, so hospital personnel really won't talk to you about what's going on with him unless you get paperwork signed, and then it's confusing, and sometimes it happens, sometimes it doesn't. But I had gone to Bryce that night. It was the Thursday night after I'd worked. It was dark. Bryce is a very scary place, especially if you've grown up with all the stories and you drive up and you have this huge antebellum home and you go in there and you fill it out and they say, oh, okay, so you go around over here. It took me almost 30 minutes to find my way in, okay, because the entrance, the door at night is like beside a loading dock. So I was terrified, you know. But I finally got in, and they brought my son in, and he had been doing pretty good at Careaway, okay? And all of a sudden, he shuffled into the room, and he was drooling. His eyes were flat. There was no emotion. He looked like a 70-year-old man. He was stooped. And I was horrified, okay? I had no idea what had happened. I was angry. So I set him down and told him I'd be right back and went to find a nurse, okay? And the nurse is like, you know, this is what we've given him. This is how he came to us. We don't have any idea what has happened. I'm like, you know, he was fine last night. I saw him last night. But evidently they had brought a young man in who had been fighting, and Shane tried to defend him or something, and they gave him a shot of Haldol. And he was still showing the side effects of that. So I sat there for 3 hours that night and just cried with his head in my lap. And finally, about 10:30, the nurse says, you know, we've got to put him to bed and get you out of here. And she took me out to the waiting area, and she sat there and talked to me for 30 more minutes or so to make sure that I was okay before I drove back to Birmingham. And this was the third hospitalization. That's been almost 4 years ago. And right now my son's doing really well. He left the hospital in December of that year. And he was on 3 different antipsychotics and a mood stabilizer. Okay? I knew now not to push him. I knew that, you know, he wasn't going to be able to deal with stress, that he might not ever be able to work. We had filled out the disability papers. We were moving forward, okay? About 6 months after that hospitalization, he started thinking more logically. His thought processes came back. The psychiatrist that he was seeing had started reducing his antipsychotics, and he was off the Prolixin and just taking 2 second-generation antipsychotics. And I remember walking across a parking lot with him to see the psychiatrist. And I asked him, you want to help so bad. You want to fix it. And I'm like, Shane, what can I do to help? And he looked at me and he said, Mom, just be patient. I'm doing the best I can. I'm trying. Okay. And I'm like, I love you. It's all that I can, say is I love you. So he had started accepting the disorder. I had started accepting the disorder, and he began to recover. Okay. He started back to school and a community college, and he would take one class that he really liked and one class that he needed. And he was in school, I guess, maybe a year, and he was talking to my sister, and my sister has been really, she moved into the house with us several years ago, and so she's been there with her 3 kids, and with individuals with schizophrenia particularly, socialization is really difficult, and her being there and the kids being there gave him someone else besides myself and his father to interact with. I think a lot of people with mental illness don't get the social interaction that they need. It's very difficult. Sometimes Shane won't respond the way that you think he should respond. The expressions aren't there. His eyes may not follow you, or we get feedback from the person that we're talking to, and sometimes that's not there. But when you've got that many people around someone, it kind of envelops them with care and love and support, and that's been really good for Shane. So he's talking to my sister, and he asked her, she asked him, well, how did it feel for your mom to have you committed? That must have been very difficult or something. And he says, Mom didn't send me away because she wanted me gone. Mom sent me away because she wanted me back. Okay? And he got it. He understood, that it was just as hard for me as it was for him. It has been a very, very long process, and it's not over. He still takes 2 antipsychotics and a mood stabilizer and, another list of things that, take care of metabolic syndrome that we have to deal with. And he hasn't made a new friend in 5 years. He's doing the best he can. I guess we all are. But I think it's important for counselors and other people to understand that the family is going through a grieving process that's not recognized. And we go through the stages of grief, but we don't get it to put it behind us. We cycle through them. I will go through acceptance and be okay, and then something will hit me and I will be back in depression again. I've accepted he may never get married, he may never have kids, and he loves kids. He loves being, the thought of being a father. So, when I let myself go there, I go through depression again. I think it would have been helpful initially if someone, a counselor or social worker, someone had sat me down and said, okay, schizophrenia is a very difficult disease, and kind of told me what to expect and helped me go through that grieving process. When somebody's diagnosed with cancer, you get flowers and you get sympathy cards, and you get enveloped in this community. But with a mental illness, that doesn't happen. We never got flowers. and we never had anyone tell us, people don't want to talk about it. A lot of stigma is associated with it, and it makes the whole process very difficult. We were fortunate in many ways. So the third hospitalization was because of the resisting arrest, possession, concealed weapon. So we still had that hanging over us 6 months after he got out of the hospital. And this was in Aniana, and the police were very, very angry. And we had already gone to court one time, and they basically wanted him to serve time. They wanted a fine. They wanted him punished. Okay, and the judge, when we went back for the final hearing, the judge took us to the back and asked Shane some questions. And Shane was pretty stable then, but he was still very flat emotionally. And the police officer came into the room, the arresting officer came in the room with the 3-foot samurai sword that Shane had been carrying in his car when he was arrested. And, he was so angry. And the judge asked me if she wanted, if I had anything to say, and I said yes, but I'd like for Shane to leave the room. And so as soon as he left the room, I turned to this police officer who was very, very angry. And I said, I can't thank you enough. I said I had seen my son a week earlier before you arrested him. And he was so bad. I said, you could have easily killed him and it would have been justified. He was out of control, and I think you showed a tremendous amount of restraint, and I really thank you, okay? They dropped all charges, okay? You could see his demeanor changed when he understood how horrible the mental illness is, okay? So I think we need to talk about it more. We need to encourage family members to talk about it. We need to encourage the community as a whole to talk about it. Because one person, one agency, one family we're not going to be able to fix it alone. And everybody gets touched by it.